Hello, my comrades of arms and the pipe smoking community of Ireland. This is the Pipepastor coming to you from Fresno on a cloudy day after a couple of days of deluge, which we desperately need in this drought-ridden valley in which I live. I'm smoking my Nording brandy glass pipe. Real nice, smooth, acrylic stem, acrylic insert. And I'm smoking in it Black Gold Plus, my second favorite tobacco, which is Black Cavendish infused with Virginias. You get it at highlandscigars.com. Delicious. No tongue bite. Beautiful. There's some shakeups going on in our community, and some people that were forced to leave their residency, and I'm sad to see Quincy go, sad to see Tommy Boy go, and others, but got some good replacements coming. I really like the idea of circulating numbers of you, different people on Tuesdays, so we get to know more of you and see you up close and personal, and that's exciting. My son Nicholas, or on YouTube he's known as Bold O'Donoghue, is going to be sharing this Tuesday, and I'm really looking forward to that. Nick is a big old man, big bearded, 6'4", 300 pounds, strong man, and he is very soft-spoken. If you haven't ever listened to Nick before, he's tender and tender-hearted, gentle and kind, and he speaks with a gentle and quiet manner, but his words carry a big stick. So give him a listen on Tuesday. I think you're going to enjoy him. I hope that he talks about his project right now, creating an app for pipe smokers and cigar smokers on special tobaccos and such, and where they can be located. And hope he shares about that, because it's a great idea. I've been speaking about some worldviews associated with moral relativism and postmodern definition of tolerance, both of which have become worldviews in America. I think around the world they become part of any political language leaning towards statism and fascism, and are palatable and readily received by people because on the surface they sound so congenial and full of egalitarian feelings of goodwill toward everybody. I want to tell you that it's insidious, dangerous, and ultimately ends in genocide. And this happens in any culture first through the propaganda machine that redefines words, and then those words redefine thoughts, which then lead to the redefinition of behavior and conduct. See, what used to be considered one of America's noble virtues, tolerance, has now become, I think, the mother of all vices, and it's moving Americans from being a virtuous people to being a vicious people. We're acting every day more viciously toward one another. Just somebody cut you off on the street, it could end up as a killing. There's riots in our streets. There's dung beetle propagandists and men only interested in their own self-promotion, like Jesse Jackson and others, Sharpton, that exploit these things and stir them up, and pretty soon there's racial division like you've never seen before. And the modern myth is this, that true tolerance consists of being neutral, to basically occupy the moral ground of Switzerland in World War II. And it has become the most entrenched assumption of the moral relativistic society in which I live today in America. Today's tolerant person occupies, or is assumed to occupy, a place of complete impartiality, at best a consistently naive assumption. At worst, I think it's idiotic. That for me to be tolerant, they believe, means that I need to tolerate every person's rights and allow every person's rights to do their own thing as long as it makes them happy, and to decide for themselves what is and what is not moral or immoral, just or unjust, right or wrong, fair, unfair, and that this is necessary for us to have a tolerant society. And anyone that resists that are people that themselves need to be resisted because they want to impose their moral beliefs and religious beliefs on others. Boy, we can't have that, can we? I talked about who has the right to impose laws and so forth on us. And if the right belongs to man without God, we're in trouble. Because then we're a Darwinian society in which the next strongest or richest guy or most powerful guy that comes along has the right to tell us what's right and what's wrong. And woe to us if he wants our wives, our money. Kid, I think I mentioned him last week. Kid was in my office one time, just as arrogant as can be, just a little punk. And he was debating me on Christian morality, and that abortion should be fine. Anybody that resists it is imposing their morality on other people. And I said, you of all people should right now be grateful that morality can be imposed. He says, why? It's because you're acting like such an arrogant little punk that I want to leap across my desk and pinch your little head off your neck. And one of the reasons why I'm not doing that is because it's against the law, a law that imposes upon me a morality derived, guess where? From the Judeo-Christian ethic. And so you of all people right now in this place ought to be very thankful that there is an imposing of morality upon me. The actual definition of tolerance, because you know words do have meaning, and it's really important that if you're using a word that belongs in my language, in your language, we both should understand what it means. And the meaning of the word tolerance is to allow or permit and respect another person's beliefs, views, practices without necessarily agreeing or sharing them, to bear up, to put up with someone you do not like or do not agree with. And it has three elements to it. The three elements of tolerance are: number one, to permit or allow. Secondly, a conduct or point of view you disagree with. Thirdly, while respecting a person's freedom in the process. Now notice this, very crucial. True tolerance is not possible unless you first disagree with the one that you are tolerating. It's crucial, it's critical to your understanding of the true meaning and definition of the word tolerance. We do not tolerate the person we agree with or share views with. Tolerance is reserved for those we stand in opposition to, disagree with, and think are wrong. Therefore, disagreement is an essential element to tolerance. It is the essential element of tolerance. So the very definition and meaning of tolerance has become lost in this new distorted meaning that's been reassigned to the word by postmodernists and by secularists, by moral relativists, to the point that the very thing that is necessary to define tolerance is now the very thing that labels a person intolerant who doesn't agree. Excuse me. So the very definition then of meaning of tolerance is that I disagree with you and that I think you're wrong. And it presents a kind of a conundrum, if you will, to the postmodern person that is adhering to a new tolerance. The conundrum is that a tolerant person must think the person that they are tolerating is wrong before they can be tolerated, but in doing so, this forces the label of intolerant on them by those pod people who've been brainwashed in today's Orwellian culture to believe otherwise. And that makes, you understand, true tolerance impossible. Tolerance has three faces to it. Tolerance can be applied differently to different things, to ideas, behaviors, and people. And the rules change depending on what is being scrutinized. For instance, civility is the tolerance of persons, and it can be equated with respecting people. One should have the freedom to express one's ideas, or most ideas anyway, without fear of reprisal. We show our respect of those that we disagree with by acting courteously toward them, allowing them to share and express their wacko ideas, if they are, in the arena of the public square, public discourse. Even though, I may contend verbally with them, maybe even vigorously against them in the public square, it is propitious that I do so while at the same time respecting the person. I'm talking about the person. Whether his or her behavior should be tolerated is, an entirely different issue. This is the second face of tolerance, the liberty to act or tolerance of one's behavior. Our civil laws are in place to demonstrate that though a person may believe what they're going to believe and that their beliefs may be tolerated, he may not act on those beliefs with impunity necessarily. We can think as we like, maybe we can even speak as we like, but we cannot act as we like without some restrictions. Some things have got to be in place in order for us to live in an ordered and structured society. Criminal, immoral behaviors are restricted. They're not tolerated by law. Abe Lincoln once said, "There is no such thing as the right to do what is wrong." The third phase of tolerance is the tolerance of ideas, and not all points of view are equal in value or in worth, and they are to be respected. They are to be given the right to be expressed most of the time, even though they may be immoral, foolish, irrational, stupid. But to assert that some views are false and immoral and foolish does not violate any meaningful definition of tolerance. And it's certainly stupid and irrational for you to assert that I should value everyone else's opinion as just as valuable and just as worthy as my own, or that every opinion should be just as equally worthy or valuable. But ironically, today's tolerant culture has little tolerance for contrary ideas or issues such as gay marriage or abortion or traditional morality, premarital sex, adultery. And so you know what happens? People like me, biblical moralists, people that believe laws come from God and therefore God must be obeyed through the laws of the land that He has instituted, are censured. labeled, shut up, persecuted. It's going to slit your throat in the end, especially when you start to consider tolerance as it's applied to Sharia law, which is absolutely intolerant. It's the view or the idea of freedom just as equal and valuable and worthy as the idea of Sharia law, which says that you cannot be free outside the Quran? The philosophy of tolerance, then, has gone kind of topsy-turvy. Tolerate most behavior, but do not tolerate opposing beliefs about those questionable behaviors, even harmful behaviors. That's what today's tolerant person does, or is required to do, or is assumed does. Everybody tolerates most behaviors, but we will not tolerate opposing beliefs about those questionable, even harmful behaviors. Contrary moral opinions are labeled, imposing one's view on others, and then censoring takes place, just like it did during the days of the witchcraft trials, when the accusation of witchcraft brought extreme prejudice and censure from the power brokers, and especially when politicians got a hold of those and were accusing opponents of witchcraft just to shut them up, take them out. Only today, labels such as intolerant and bigot and discrimination and such are used to force people underground, or to marginalize them, or to invisibilize them. There's a case in point of a baker here in the States who, out of his moral convictions, refused to make a cake for a gay couple getting married. Refused to make a marriage cake. Now, you may or may not agree. For you to strongly disagree with him and not come against him and infringe his rights is to be tolerant. But this, quote, tolerant society got together with a whole bunch of people that disagreed with him and put him out of business. Listen, most of what passes for tolerance today is not tolerance, but rather intellectual cowardice. And I got that from a website called Reason to Believe. Intellectual cowardice. And I agree with it. Today's tolerant puppets are afraid of intelligent engagement, and they hide behind the myth of neutrality. They're unwilling to be challenged by alternate points of view without labeling, criticizing, mocking, disrespecting. So they just hurl insults and they persecute the rights and the freedom of those who disagree with them. Mock their faith, except if they're Muslim. You know, in 1984, Orwell, I think, got it right when he developed a concept. I don't think he ever mentioned it in his book, as I remember, but he developed a concept called doublespeak. And he was talking about the insidiousness of redefining words and language by deliberately disguising, distorting, or reversing the meaning of words. When I talk about the consequence of ideas, I'm talking about a process in which doublespeak will lead to doublethink. And doublethink, when in the culture long enough, will lead to ultimately a change in the way people treat each other. It's said that the last virtue or value of a degenerating society is the philosophy of tolerance. This was a criticism against Nazis, World War II. The good book says in Colossians 2:8, see to it that none of you are taken into captivity by hollow and deceitful philosophies. Because philosophies are built on ideas. And ideas carry with them consequences. To the tune of 100 million Russians put to death through different regimes with different ideas. Let me give you a case in point. In one college here in the States, there were students who voiced their disapproval of homosexuality, the gay lifestyle. They were labeled intolerant, and they were forced to watch hours of triple X-rated homoerotic pornography while being observed by their professor doing so. And if they showed during that time any signs of disgust or of revulsion, then they were forced to watch more until they showed none. One administrator came out and said it's the mission of the public school system to not tolerate intolerance or non-acceptance. One philosophy professor at the University of Ottawa said that our idea, quote, our idea of a virtuous citizen is one who tolerates everything except intolerance. Sooner or later, that kind of doublespeak will not only get entrenched in a society in the way that it thinks, but in the way that it behaves to certain sects of people. Like I said last week, sooner or later, the world is going to have to get rid of Christians one way or the other. That is, those Christians that adhere to a biblical standard of behavior, because it will no longer be able to tolerate us for being intolerant. And we are set up, if we choose to believe the way God tells us to believe, and if you're an American, most of your morals come from that belief system, even if you don't adhere to it. Your worldview, your sense of decency, the whole philosophy of caring for the elderly, the sick, the helpless, the whole ethic behind women having equal rights and not being chattel, the whole thing that restrains us from killing little girls, butchering little babies that aren't born perfect like they were in Sparta, not having any murderous entertainment like they had in the arenas of old. Those were all hard-fought issues that were overturned by those who follow Jesus. You don't have to agree with me. I'm not asking you to. You don't have to like everything we did. Not everything Christians did have been perfect. But I'll tell you what, I challenge you to read a book that is absolutely seminal and absolutely censured from public discourse. It's censured from the college community. Not allowed to read it. Because you cannot read it openly and maintain an anti-Christian ethic. The title of the book is called Under the Influence, and it's written by Alvin Schmidt. It's a big, thick book, but the chapters are short. And you can work through the chapters and see what the legacy of the Christian faith has brought to the world in which you know today. The reason why I'm telling you that is not to convert you. I wouldn't mind if you did convert, and I'd be glad to baptize you. That's my agenda now. But reading the book will help you understand the irony hypocrisy, idiocy of those in power, especially those that have a say-so in what is disseminated in the public school system, in the college universities, that they want to kill Christianity. They want to exorcise God from the school system, from its thoughts, from its pages of history. Read Under the Influence and you'll find out how stupid, perhaps how insidious, in the words of Orwell, that is. Without some kind of divinely ordained word, law that restrains human behavior, you will be destined to live in a world of anarchy, and anarchy always creates such a moral vacuum that the people cry for some kind of despot, some kind of totalitarian regime that we've come to know as statism. In the words of the late Francis Schaeffer, great Christian philosopher, when asked by R.C. Sproul, one of my favorite theologians, what we should all fear the most in the future, he said it's statism, the philosophy of statism or nanny state. In order for statism to happen, God has to be exorcised from the conscience of the public. And I fear for my country, and I fear for you if that happens. It is happening. I believe it will happen. God help us when it does. This is the Pipepastor, and that's it for today. And I'll come to you next week with some more of this until my friend Michael Rizzo fires me. And till then, comments are welcome. Sláinte.